Hello everybody, and welcome to my third top 10 list. In celebration of hitting 10,000 subscribers, I asked my viewers to come up with 10 top 10 lists that they thought would be interesting or entertaining for me to compose. Today, we will be counting down my top 10 characters I wished were gay or romanceable. And when I say romanceable, I mean that I'd be perfectly okay if they were at least heterosexually romanceable. Special thanks to Loco Roco Love Katamari and CC Dragoon for requesting this list. I should preface this by saying that this list is purely just for fun, you guys. I am in no way trying to quote-unquote change these characters or say that they shouldn't be the sexuality that they consider themselves to be, ignoring the fact that all these people are totally fictional anyway. I just find it entertaining to imagine what it would be like if these characters could be romanced in that way. I should also give you fair warning that this list may contain some spoilers about the games that they appear in. So, without further ado, here are my top 10 characters I wished were gay or romanceable. Number 10. Prompto from Final Fantasy XV. Anyone who's watched my LP of Final Fantasy XV knows that Prompto is by far my favorite character from the game. He's the happy-go-lucky comic relief of the group with awesome hair that reminds me of, well, a chocobo. And yet, his character actually has way more depth than that. After watching the anime short starring Prompto when he and Noctis went to school together, I absolutely fell in love with this guy. First of all, at a younger age, he was a chubbier kid who motivated himself to exercise and eat right in order to lose the weight and gain his confidence. That in and of itself is inspiring to me. But his interactions with Noctis were absolutely adorable. Part of the reason why he tried to lose all the weight was to become, quote, worthy enough to be Noctis's friend. That may sound a bit weird, and I certainly don't think anyone needs to have a certain physical image to become friends with someone, but I still found it sweet in a way. It's really hard not to ship these two characters by the end of the anime. And then in the video game proper, the bromance undertones continue, especially during one cutscene where Prompto confides in Noctis about his personal insecurities. Despite the fact that the two have been essentially best friends for years by this point, Prompto still feels like he's never truly been worthy enough to be Noctis's friend, let alone his best friend. It was during this conversation that I could really feel the bond between these two young men, and I really got to witness a more serious and vulnerable side to Prompto. And I really wished there were more touching moments like this between Noctis and Prompto throughout the game. Now, I never seriously thought the developers would actually allow Noctis to romance any of his male companions. However, I can't help but imagine how beautiful this scene would be if Noctis and or Prompto did actually admit to some deep feelings for each other. No offense to Luna, of course, because I think that girl rocks too. But if not for the fact that the story demands for Noctis and Luna to be a thing, I can definitely see something going on between Noctis and Prompto and have it be totally believable. Number 9. Harvey Dent from Batman: The Telltale series. So let's be honest here, fans have been shipping Bruce and Harvey for years, long before this game was released. So the idea of a bromance, and possibly more, between them isn't anything new. And I definitely never believed that Telltale would actually allow Bruce to share romantic feelings towards Harvey in this game. that's what Catwoman is for, but at least Telltale allowed that relationship to be completely optional, and I'm glad that was so. However, one thing about this series is that Telltale purposely wanted to take creative liberties from the traditional Batman lore. That's one of the strengths of the Telltale version of the Batman series, in my opinion. Telltale wanted to take certain elements of the familiar lore and twist it around or turn it completely on its head. As a result, the episodes felt fresh and made you keep guessing, while still feeling very much like Batman. This may bother some of the hardcore traditional fans who may not necessarily want to see the lore messed with in this way, and that's totally fine, but fortunately for them, the vast majority of Batman content out there does follow the formula they are accustomed to. These games can, and should be, allowed to be their own thing, because I know there is an audience for that experience. Given all that, if any Batman story could explore a romantic relationship between Harvey and Bruce, it would be this one. I mean, the developers are experimenting already, so why not these two? Some people may argue that making Bruce and Harvey homosexual or bisexual in this non-traditional universe wouldn't add anything to the story, but I totally disagree. So much of the game's storyline focuses on the relationship between these two men. I think that the tragedy of the events that occur through the episodes would have been incredibly engaging and powerful if Bruce and Harvey actually had romantic feelings for each other. I'm sure the story gets a bit enhanced if you decided to have Bruce pursue a romantic relationship with Selina Kyle. So why couldn't you do the same thing with Harvey too? From a narrative standpoint, I think that would have been an incredible opportunity to explore. How amazing would that final showdown between Batman and Two-Face be if Bruce was desperately trying to save Harvey because he loved him? Maybe that could even convince Harvey to surrender, break down crying because he doesn't want to hurt Bruce either, and finally get the help that he desperately needed. I think so many Harvey fans would have loved an opportunity, a chance, to give his character a much happier or hopeful ending. And if it was going to happen on any Batman media, this would most certainly be one of them. I think giving us an option to have an ending like that would have been massively satisfying to a lot of players. And half of the things that these two guys say to each other end up being a shipper's paradise anyway. Maybe in another 10 to 20 years we'll finally be able to see a version of Bruce and Harvey where they actually do possess romantic feelings for the other. Because I honestly believe that could be an incredible story to tell. Number 8. Krem from Dragon Age Inquisition. I know I am most certainly not alone with this opinion. Krem is a transgender character in the latest installment of one of my favorite video game franchises of all time, and the way that the writers handled him was excellent. Some may say it wasn't perfect, but I think it was worlds better than how trans characters have been handled in the entertainment industry in the past. He's not there for comic relief. He's treated with way more respect and integrity. Jennifer Hale did a fantastic job delivering his dialogue, which I felt was very realistic. They don't force his transgenderness in your face all the time. Sure, they have one major conversation where they address it, but it's done in a way that is natural, believable, and I think fits with what was happening in the scene at the time. The Inquisitor asks questions the way I think a transgender person would be asked in real life. And Krem, as well as the Iron Bull, responds to these questions in a way that is also realistic and believable. I've never actually dated a transgender person before in real life, but I think it would have been so cool to be able to date one in a video game at least. I think BioWare missed a major opportunity here, but I believe they've heard that from their fans loud and clear. I think that they were very pleasantly surprised by how much of a positive response this character had on the fans, and I think that's absolutely incredible. Which makes me wonder and hope that perhaps Krem could be romanceable in a future Dragon Age game. He's just so cool and relatable, the kind of person you'd be able to grab a beer with but also confide in, someone you could be vulnerable to and feel safe. Ugh. Seriously, BioWare, give us Krem in the next Dragon Age, please. Number 7. Cullen, Dragon Age Inquisition. Speaking of which, anyone who has watched my Dragon Age LPs knows that I had been wanting to romance the snot out of Cullen since the very first game. The first Grey Warden I have ever created was a female mage, and she totally had a thing for Cullen. Although the moments are quite brief during the prologue, I couldn't help but fall for that Templar instantly. I was glad he had a decent amount of screen time in Dragon Age 2, and was overjoyed that he not only would play a larger role in Inquisition, but he also would be a fully romanceable character. Now, I never really expected him to be anything but straight, but I admit I had a lot of wishful thinking. As long as I was able to at least romance him with my female Inquisitors, that would have been enough for me. Still, had the option been there, I'm sure Art Adar would have been all over that. And, to be fair, he did try. Not to put down Dorian or anything, don't worry. Those two are hopelessly devoted to each other. But I mean, knowing those two, I'm pretty sure they'd be perfectly cool with the idea of having Cullen hang out with them. I mean, if Cullen was totally open to that too.
Nothing wrong with having a bit of fun.
Who wouldn't be a little curious?
Don't tease me like that, Cullen. How about a game of Wicked Grace? Eh? Number 6. Vaughn from Tales from the Borderlands. The relationship between Rhys and Vaughn is yet another fine example of a total bromance. Depending on how you choose your dialogue choices, of course. Vaughn is my favorite Telltale game character to date. He's funny, he's loyal, intelligent, totally adorkable, but he's also sensitive and isn't afraid to be vulnerable with someone. And for the record, I loved him way before I realized how totally jacked he was. Heck, I totally loved him before what happens to him in the final episode, which I'm not going to talk about in detail due to spoilers. And he's also voiced by Chris Hardwick, a comedian I also absolutely adore and find very attractive. One of my favorite moments in the game was when Vaughn confided in Rhys about how he feels so out of his friend's league, very similar to Prompto's conversation with Noctis earlier in this video. The hug that these two share with each other just took me over the top. It was so sweet. But the best part is, Vaughn may actually be gay, or at least bisexual. Chris Hardwick recorded some dialogue for Vaughn that suggested he actually experimented with other men back in the day, and that perhaps he was still questioning his sexuality.
I mean, I've never really experienced love, but always really admired. I mean, you're strong. I mean, the pecs. And how do you get that one ripple, like, going right up through the... I mean, I remember when I was a kid, and there was this one time at camp, there was this other kid there, and, you know, we were young. We didn't know what was going on. And, I mean, I had never... Zach and I would get together, go to the gym, work out, and then go to the bathroom together. But it was more of a bonding experience, you know? It was more about two people sharing the human experience. You know what I'm saying? Alright, you're not responding, I get it. I was always curious, like, well, how do people go to the bathroom? I mean, it's not anything, you know, because no one sets you aside and tells you how that happens. So, I mean, so yes, we experimented a little bit with some things, and I don't really feel like, I mean, I'm not, it sort of made me question, like, what's real, what matters, you know? And so I think that's when I really, because I was this little fat kid, and I think that's when I really started working on my physique, you know. I kid, probably gonna kill you. We can talk about it later. That's why you have to be careful.
Vaughn? Vaughn?
Which makes me wonder how Reese could have responded to that. Could he have told Vaughn that maybe he too questioned his sexuality as well, and perhaps there was a certain someone that he may or may not have developed a bit of a crush with? Someone really close to him? Well, we may never know because that dialogue never actually made it to the game proper. So it can't officially be considered canon. But I think it's interesting that the writers wrote it in the first place, and Chris actually did record it. I have to say, even if that dialogue was in and didn't actually result in a romance between Reese and Vaughn, it still would have been an incredibly awesome scene to stumble upon. I'm assuming they didn't put it in because it perhaps would have been a little out of place and too random to just drop into the plot, but I think it could have been set up in a more natural way, similar to when Vaughn was confiding with Reese before their hug. Well, I'm not going to expect it, but there's a part of me that dreams maybe they'll revisit Vaughn's possible queerness in the next Tales from the Borderlands game. We shall see. For now, let's just move on. I couldn't help it, guys. I'm so sorry. Number 5. James Vega from Mass Effect 3. This game was the very first one that I LP'd, and it still baffles me to this day why Jimmy was not romanceable, even to a female shepherd. I didn't necessarily need James to be gay. I just kind of thought it would have been cool to pursue a relationship with him. Yes, you can kind of hook up with him in one of the DLCs, but that really doesn't count. James Vega isn't really my type physically. I'm not really big into guys that are that humongously muscular, but I have to say, even though he was a totally new character to the franchise, I grew to really love the guy. He was just really likable and relatable. It also didn't hurt that he was voiced by Freddie Prinze Jr., who I also had a major crush on back in the 90s. But yeah, I guess BioWare didn't think most people would be interested in romancing someone who hadn't appeared in any of the previous games. But then again, you could romance Cortez and Traynor, so that's not a valid enough reason. I'm sure the real reason is because they had so many romances already, and they didn't want to put in the extra resource to add yet another one. But come on, Jimmy is there with Shepard from the beginning of the game. They totally could have had plenty of time to bond and possibly have something going on between them. Well, that's okay. Clive, Cortez, and Kaidan can just admire him from afar while he's getting his tattoos done. Number 4. Lukas from Minecraft Story Mode. This game never officially allows you to establish a romantic relationship with the characters, but it at least does seem to be suggestive towards possible feelings between male Jesse and Petra, or female Jesse and Lukas. The thing is, based on the dialogue choices, you could also see the exact same chemistry between female Jesse and Petra and male Jesse and Lukas. Now, I'm fully aware that this game is geared more towards a younger audience, but I'm a firm believer that you're never too young to be exposed to the LGBT community, at least to be aware that they exist. Just my opinion. Telltale has shown that they can explore romance in their recent games, The Walking Dead Season 3 and their Batman series being prime examples. So of course I was going to be shipping my male Jesse and Lukas hard through both seasons. I've even gotten some sweet fan art from my viewers about it as well. Lukas is loyal, dependable, and brave, yet also sweet and sensitive. And of course, he's voiced by none other than Scott Porter. One can dream. Whether he would only be romanceable by a female Jessie or not, I think having the option to date Lukas would have been a very welcome addition for me. Number 3. Carth Onasi, Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic. I've never actually LP'd this game, but it's one of my favorites of all time. It was the very first BioWare game I had ever played, and for me, gave the most shocking plot twist of any video game to date. It was also the very first game that allowed me to pursue an in-game romance with another character. Obviously, back in the day, you could only have heterosexual relationships, and each gender had only one option. For the men, you could romance the Jedi Bastila. For the women, you could romance the pilot, Carth Onasi. Carth is dashing, has amazing hair, and is a bit of a Boy Scout. The kind of person I am a sucker for. And even better, little did I know back then that he was voiced by the same voice actor of another character in another future BioWare game, Raphael Sbarge, the voice of Kaidan Alenko. No wonder I liked this guy so much. When I first started out the game, I played a male character. Then, when I met Carth and partway realized he could be romanced, but only by a female, you can bet I immediately restarted from the very beginning, but this time rolling a female character. And no, I had absolutely no regrets on that decision whatsoever. Carth would be the first of many shameless video game crushes I would ultimately have in numerous games to come. So, it was only natural for me to wish that he was romanceable by a male character. Number 2. Jeff Joker Moreau from the Mass Effect series. Before I go any further, let me begin by saying that I love the Joker and EDI romance. Yes, I do find their relationship absolutely adorable. This list does not change that. However, I think that having the option of Shepard romancing Joker would have been an incredibly engaging and adorable story as well. And that just means if you don't pursue Joker, he would still naturally then pursue EDI. Much like if you don't pursue Garrus or Tali, they would pursue each other, or if you don't pursue Dorian and the Iron Bull, they would pursue each other. I know I've talked about why I think a Shepard romance with Joker would be incredible in a couple videos, so my apologies if you've already heard this before. I'll first address what some people may be thinking, especially prior to playing Mass Effect 3. Just because Joker has Frolic syndrome does not mean he can't be romantically involved with someone, even physically. So let's get that quick thing out of the way. And yes, I'm also a big fan of Joker's voice actor, Seth Green. I mean, the man's got red hair. Of course I'm a fan. So let's get that out of the way too. A lot of people see Joker as the smart aleck, sarcastic, comic relief character in the game, and he certainly is. But that doesn't mean that his character doesn't have any depth either. You get some really deep and intimate conversations with Joker and Shepard, especially in Mass Effect 3. Besides Dr. Chakwas, he's been with Shepard consistently since the very beginning of the first game. I know Garrus and Tali were in the first game too, but I specifically said very beginning of the game. These two have been through so much, even when Shepard joined Cerberus in the second game. He's been nothing but loyal to Shepard and devoted to their mission. My heart still aches every time I hear Joker call out Shepard's name at the beginning of Mass Effect 2. These two respect each other and have had plenty of time to form a solid bond with one another. But could Joker possibly possess feelings for Shepard, even for just a female Shepard? Maybe one of the major reasons why Joker is so sarcastic and jokes around so much is because it's a coping mechanism for the insecurities he may secretly have. He's a fantastic pilot, obviously, but he also has a challenging physical condition. There he is, surrounded by all these all-stars. You have a powerful Asari Justicar, a prodigy of a thief, the best Drell assassin in the galaxy, a brilliant scientist Larian, a Krogan bred to be an ideal specimen of its species. The list goes on and on. And then there's Shepard, the legendary hero, first human Spectre, and the leader of a mission that would determine the fate of the entire galaxy. And here's Joker and his crippled self, so to speak. Surely the man must have some insecurities that he's trying to cope with, especially if he happens to harbor feelings for Shepard. But why would someone like Shepard be interested in a guy like him? He's not as cool as Garrus, not as smart as Liara, not as naively cute as Tali. How in the world could he ever imagine to be worthy enough for Shepard to notice him in that way? Maybe that's why he uses his humor and sarcasm as a shield, because he feels too inadequate and is subconsciously crying for attention just so Senpai can notice him. How incredible would it be to discover all of that in an extremely emotional conversation with Joker on the ship? To see the man finally admit something to Shepard that he's never been able to fully admit to himself. Watching him break down crying because in his head, he doesn't believe he's deserving enough to have that with the one he cares so deeply about. And Shepard sitting there, realizing that Joker is so much more than a guy who brings out the laughs. And maybe Shepard, for the first time, realizes he or she always had strong feelings for Jeff too, all along. I don't know. I think all of that would have been amazing and was a total missed opportunity for BioWare. But that's just me. And the number one character I wished was gay or romanceable, Alistair from Dragon Age Origins. This should come to no surprise for any of you who has been with me on my channel for any significant amount of time. To this day, Alistair has remained by far my biggest video game crush of all time. Good looks aside, again, he's funny, sensitive, hopelessly romantic, and adorably shy and vulnerable when he tries to ask you out. Alistair's pretty much got it all as far as I'm concerned, so naturally, I was extremely disappointed that he was only romanceable by a female warden. Again, when you select certain dialogue while interacting with him as a male warden, I can certainly see some extremely bromancy nuances. I don't think it would be too far-fetched at all for Alistair to at least be bisexual. After him and Cullen, I just really am hoping for a game that allows me to finally romance that knight in shining armor. Maybe that's why I adore the Sir Gilmore mod in Origins so much. Rory pretty much is the answer to that itch I've been dying to scratch, but it's not in the canon game proper. Actually, Cassia is that gay knight in shining armor who, in fact, is only available to other men, so major props to Solstice for that. He's basically a ginger version of Alistair, so I guess that's a win-win. Well, that's a wrap, everybody. Let me know down in the comments who you wished was either gay or straight or romanceable. Thank you again so much for watching this top 10 list. I hope you continue enjoying the rest of the lists I'll have for you in the coming months. Until next time, love yourselves and love each other.